Someone else is now auditioning to be Candace Owens' best friend. Here we go again. Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. Charleston White. Charleston White said some things very recently, which leads me to believe he's now trying to get on the black man bad, anti-black bandwagon to get his payday, to get his money. And there's several things that make me think he's going to do really well at it. First of all, you may be wondering who's Charleston White. Yes, great question. Who is Charleston White? In order to understand who Charleston White is, you're going to have to be familiar with at least two things. You're going to have to be familiar with the Boondocks and Lord of the Rings. From the Boondocks, let's take Uncle Ruckus. From Lord of the Rings, we have hobbits. So Uncle Ruckus and a hobbit, put them together, there you have Charleston White. Charleston White has decided he was on Anton Daniels' show, and he made the statement that black culture is trash. I'm guessing a collab with Brandon Tatum must be on the horizon. Maybe he's actually going to be in the new Uncle Tom Part 2 movie. Maybe he hasn't made the cut yet, and maybe he's just auditioning to be in Part 3. What's really amazing about this is the evidence that he uses to support. I'm sorry, I can't even call it evidence, but the instances that he claims exist that demonstrate that black culture is trash. So he says that in black culture, we glorify gangsters and murderers and pimps and robbers, everything bad we celebrate. He's saying in black culture, we don't celebrate doctors. We don't celebrate graduations. We don't celebrate spelling bee winners. This is what he says. And I'm like, this sounds a lot more like a confession of how trash you and whoever you hang around with are, and less of a critique of black culture. Because if you don't celebrate these things, if the people you hang around with don't celebrate these things, that's a you problem, Charleston White. There's plenty of us black folks who understand that we definitely celebrate those kinds of things. There are black men in prison who will do stuff for their kids when they're doing great in school, because they may realize that they've taken a wrong turn, but they want to make sure their kids go another way. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but that's not the intention. He says Black History Month, there's nothing positive going on. And I'm like, we're starting to see a trend here. This is the utterances of somebody who is utterly ignorant, somebody who clearly knows nothing about history. And so he's just making stuff up, pulling stuff from out of his ass. That's what this sounds like. Because once again, if you are not celebrating any of the myriads of heroes and black historical figures throughout Black History Month, that sounds like you just don't know what the hell you're talking about. You can look at my channel and see that I routinely deal with various figures throughout the month of February to spotlight certain black history figures and the impact that it has on us today. Been doing this for years. And I didn't start doing it on my channel. Started while I was inside. He says, hey, look at the trending topics. That's proof that black culture is trash. Can you name the black social media company that you're basing this information on? Because Twitter isn't black owned, Facebook isn't black owned, YouTube isn't black owned. I mean, what does this have to do with black culture? That sounds like social media culture. Like, literally, there's no sense, there's no logic to any of the stuff he's saying. He says there are no black heroes in TV. Django was the last black hero. This motherfucker is stupid. He says Django was the last black hero and Tarantino gave him to us. I'm surprised. Maybe he wasn't talking about Django. He was talking about Steven, because Steven seems to be the kind of guy he would look up to. But I'm pretty sure a movie like Black Panther came out after Django. Just saying, just tossing that one out off the top of our head. Once again, though, we don't own Marvel Studios. Black folk don't own Marvel Studios. So if you want to say, well, hey, that's not even a black movie, that's not even a black-owned studio, okay, it was black actors, black producer, black writer, black director. So there were several black hands in the pie, but yeah, I get it. If you don't want to count that as black culture, cool, cool. Once again, though, if you're going to make the critique and you're not counting what's in popular culture, then you can't, on one hand, take negative stuff out of popular culture and say, oh, that's on black folk. And then take positive stuff out of popular culture and say, oh, that's not on black folk. Like, wait a minute, I'm noticing a pattern of inconsistency here. And it actually is funny because he also mentions that we don't celebrate black doctors, black businesses doing well. We don't celebrate black bankers. And then I'm like, in seconds from each other, you mentioned that we don't celebrate black bankers. And then you say that there's no black heroes in movies. And you apparently missed the movie about, real life story, about one of the first black bankers who had to have a white face as a front so that he could do his business. That was a movie. That was a real life story, but I'm guessing that movie was just a tad bit too sophisticated for somebody as simple-minded as Charleston White. Okay, then he starts talking about black propaganda. At this point, I'm like, huh. And I thought that there was no one less intelligent than Herschel Walker. This guy's giving Herschel a run for his money. He goes off on some tangent about Hitler and the Jews. I'm like, oh my God. Do you even understand? At this point, words are just coming out of his mouth. There's no rhyme, reason, logic, or sense to any of the stuff he's saying. It's just words coming out of his mouth. And he talks about black propaganda is the reason why the black culture is trash. And white folks never use propaganda for slavery. And I'm like, yeah, this dude really might just need a history book, something. But it makes sense because he says where he's from, they don't celebrate education. That would explain some things. He says they just celebrate deceit, unfaithfulness, killers, womanizers. And I'm like, huh, pretty sure James Bond hasn't been played by a black man yet. Just say. Because it's amazing. All of these things that he's blaming on black culture, you could say, wait a minute. Nah, like glorifying gangsters. Goodfellas isn't a black movie. Godfather isn't a black movie. Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, The Shield, corrupt cops. Like there's a whole host of television programs, of movies, of these characters and figures that have been built up and propped up Sopranos. And they're not played by, written by, or depicting black people. But idiots like Charleston White somehow still want to make this about black man bad. And I'm like, hey, why don't you say the problem isn't black culture? Why don't you say the problem is American culture? Would you dare say that? Or would that piss off the white folks that are cheering for you as you're bashing black people? See, you know who gets you those little butter biscuits you're looking for. And so you're like, no, I'm going to keep lying. I'm going to do this little song and dance, this little short shoe tap dance, just to stay on their good side and keep the gravy train going. But he goes on and just rants about a whole bunch of stupid stuff. And Anton gives not just no pushback. Anton actually goes, huh, yeah, you're right. No, Anton, he's not right. And any simple look at actual facts would have demonstrated how not right, how out of touch with reality, logic, and reason Charleston White is, and apparently has been. Because one of the funny things is he talks about how rappers are just selling these negative images and stereotypes, and that's what makes them so bad, and they're writing these bad lyrics. And he's like, oh, you can't blame the white man because they wrote those lyrics before the white man came. And if you remember lyrics from Jay-Z talking about how he used to rhyme like common sense, so 5 million rhyme like common sense, you realize, number one, that's not true. But there's another point of that that's really interesting, because he's criticizing these rappers for, even if it's, whether it's before or after, for selling negative images to the people. And then he starts talking about how, well, in his real life, he's a positive person and he helps people. But for social media, for his online persona, he says a lot of outlandish stuff and is basically a shock jock. I'm like, wait a minute. So you're the scumbag you're talking about. Please make it make sense. But when you're dealing with stupid motherfuckers, it's not going to. So that's why I say, no. What this was from Charleston White wasn't an indictment of black culture. It was a confession of his own culture. Charleston White is trash. As always, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, like, share, subscribe if you have not subscribed already. But if you disagree with me, if you think, no, black people are evil, they're part of the children of the lie, go ahead and give me a thumbs down and tell me in the comment section, do you think that Charleston White is going to be good enough to replace Jesse Lee Peterson now that he's been outed? I'll see you next time. Thank you for checking out this episode. If you would like to see a video about a different marble-mouthed moron, you can click on the screen here. I'll see you next time.